we're all very fortunate to have Sunny Hibbets here with us today to share her understanding of the Enneagram. It's obviously a topic that speaks to Sunny very much. We've had talks back and forth about this, and it's a pleasure to hear more about the Enneagram. And also, if you would let us know how you came to this good knowledge. It's a rather interesting topic. So how about a hand for Sunny Hibbets? All right, Sunny, all yours.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to talk about how I learned about it when I start. So I'll just start screen sharing. I heard about the Enneagram through my Aunt Nicole, who is now a licensed marriage family therapist. And I actually used talking about the Enneagram as one of my projects in the Holistic Health Internship. So this might be a good example of that if you're looking to create something kind of creative of something you like within the program too. But yeah, so I'll get started. Today we're gonna talk about the Enneagram, and my name's Sunny. And like I said, my aunt has taught me about this, and so we have collaborated on these slides in the past. So in this presentation, I will be talking about what the Enneagram is, right? And how it's different from other personality models, some basic origin and basic theory, the 9 types, and type variation, and identifying your type, and maybe some discussion. So I sent you guys an email about taking a test on the Enneagram. So definitely keep that in mind for what we'll be talking about today, but also just take it in. This is a lot to take in, and we're going on this journey together. So take notes, but also just enjoy the information. Nice. And in this, because of how I'm sharing it, I can't see your messages. So hopefully just shout out to me if anything is weird. All right, so what is the Enneagram to start? So the Enneagram is actually a personality model. So this is similar to something that you may have heard of called Myers-Briggs type indicator. So basically, it's a way of modeling our personality. So our personality in psychology is basically our thoughts, behaviors, feelings, and emotions. So it's how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive other people, how we're conditioned, what we learn, and really our reality of our life. So what's really cool about the Enneagram, it's different from something like MBTI. So Myers-Briggs theory indicator is basically, um, you know, it's the types that are like, that you've heard before that are like, I'm an ENFP, I'm an INTJ. But in that theory, or that personality model, there's only 16 types. In the Enneagram, there can actually, if you apply all known variants of the Enneagram to it, there can be 54 different representations of this model, which is really cool. And I find Myers-Briggs a little difficult to wrap my head around. It's more of a mental model. This is more of an emotional model. It can be related to like a core story or trauma, and some sort of inner experience. So that's what it is. And now I'm going to go into origins and basic theory. I'm definitely going to be talking more about the basic theory, but I just wanted to give a little bit about the origins. So this is a diagram of the Enneagram symbol in different parts. So the Enneagram symbol has a circle, a triangle, and a hexad. And now if we put these all together, you would get the Enneagram symbol that has actually, interestingly, ancient origins. The Enneagram can be traced back to Pythagoras of 570 BC and other Egyptian mythology, Sufism, Jewish mysticism, the Odyssey, which is really crazy that we use it today in modern psychology. So some people who've worked on it in our modern day would be Don Richard Riso, Russ Hudson, Beatrice Chestnut, and Oscar Isco. So that's just some names to throw out there to give them some creds. So if you look at these, they're their own separate symbols. But when they come together, they make this symbol. And if you look at this, there are 9 different points. And those 9 different points of the symbol, they can all interact in different ways. If you notice, all the lines are touching each other and the circle unites them. So these are each a personality type in this model. So if we take a look, these are the 9 types. So we have the reformer for 1, 2, the helper, 3, the achiever, 4, the individualist, and so on. Now, from different eras of working on the Enneagram, there's different names for these numbers, but the names are arbitrary. You really want to know about your number. And so if you took the test, you might have a good idea of that so far, but in this presentation, I hope you can figure that out pretty good by the end of the lecture. So with that, if you look at these numbers, there's actually 9 numbers, right? So each can be grouped into 3 sections: 1, 9, and 8, 2, 3, and 4, 7, 6, and 5. So I'll show you that. There are 3 centers of intelligence in this model. So I know this might sound like a lot of information, so just think about it as though we looked at the 9 numbers. Now we're looking at it into a section of 3 parts. And so it's really cool because each number has a center of intelligence. So if you take a look at numbers 2, 3, and 4, they're all in the feeling center. And if you take a look at 5, 6, 7, they're in the thinking center, and then the instinctive center. So I'm going to go a little bit more into depth in these, but just to give you kind of a broad understanding, it's a core intelligence. It's a way of relating to yourself and others and how you perceive the world, how you make your decisions. Do you use your instincts, feeling more in your body? Or do you feel and really experience the world through your emotional reality? Or do you intellectualize your experience? Hope that makes sense. And we'll take a break in a little bit to talk about that with some pairs. So to go even deeper into that, to how that could make sense, is basically these centers have like a core, what women say is an emotional dance. So take a look here. If you look at each center, there is a feeling of shame in the feeling center. That's kind of a feeling they struggle with. They'll really wallow in that experience, right? For those numbers. And then for the thinking center, fear, right? They're in their head, they're intellectualizing, they're thinking of all these possible scenarios. And for anger, it's more protective. It's following these body instincts, all right? So that's just a glimpse. And let me just explain those a little more in depth. So if you're somebody who, like I'm saying, really relates to their emotional experience and shame, something that's big for you, you're probably a 4, 3, or a 2. So for example, the thinking triad, if you take a look at this photo, you can see a bunch of words relating to these numbers. And it's just expressing how the thinking triad works, right? There's mental stimulation, being prepared, thinking, brainstorming, judgment. And like I said, core underlying emotion is fear. They can sometimes lack a sense of inner guidance, being really in their head, and they really focus on seeking security through that mental stimulation. Hope that makes sense. So like I said, those numbers are 5, 6, and 7. And then after that, I'm just going to hop into the next center. Hope this is a good speed for you guys. I'll check in with you guys on the break too. Next, we have the feeling center. Now, this is, like if you look at these words inside, this is feeling, emotions, identity, really relational with their accomplishments. So these numbers, like I said, core underlying emotion is shame. And this is on the negative side. They have other emotions too, right? Of feeling and human connection. So it's not just shame, but that's like a core inner structure story. And they're really concerned with self-image and identity, okay? And then they focus on seeking love, attention, and mirroring people in their life. So as you can see, it's very in their heart, and those emotions really sit in the heart, and those experiences do. So though the feeling and the thinking are I think most people can usually grab and understand pretty well for these sections of the Enneagram. But this last section is a little different. This is the instinct center. Now, this center is actually related to their gut. So their physical body and movement and their physical boundaries, right? So that does include emotional and mental boundaries. And they're really sensing and right, they're following that instinct and really long for that independence. So core underlying emotion is anger. It can be repressed or a suppressed anger, or even out of touch with anger. Like I said, concerned with maintaining boundaries and control. That's really important to them with that instinct. And they really focus on seeking autonomy, not depending on others and having their space. So with that, there's one more piece of this I want to include. So I hope that makes sense. And just to confirm, right, it's those 3 centers, and in those centers, there are specific numbers. Within those numbers, they actually interrelate with each other, which is why this model is so dynamic, right? With something like MBTI, it's just a few letters. Those have other parts too, but whole other ballpark. But this goes into, you know, if you take a look at the growth image on the left, you can see there's a triangle on the inside. And that's 9, 3, and 6. So I'll just give you an example of how this works, because there's numbers in growth in the Enneagram. You want to, let me explain this, my bad. So in psychology models and labeling identification in psych, it's pretty important to, when you recognize that you're in a model or some sort of identification, in some circumstances, when it has negative impacts on you, it's really healthy to grow out of that and integrate new parts to yourself, right? Integrating your shadow, very big in psychology. So in the Enneagram, they have that. So let's take a look at that triangle I was talking about. We have 9. If you look at that growth, it has an arrow that points to 3. So 9s, for example, they're kind of go with the flow. Big decisions are a lot for them. They really disdain conflict and try to keep out of things. So a 3, for example, and you'll know more about these other types soon. 3, for example, they're really into making those decisions and taking action and going forward in their achievements, and are very goal oriented, right? So a 9 would want to take on those 3 traits, right? So that's how they integrate. But if they're not feeling that well, they're a little stressed out in their life, maybe they're not taking care of themselves, they can stress into another number arranged on the Enneagram. So if we look at the stress diagram, 9s will integrate into 6. So, instead of their kind of mediating, chilling vibe, they'll be a little more skeptic and a little more concerned about other people and their safety. So that's just a quick glance of an example of how they can interact with each other. And so that wraps up just our basic theory. So let's take maybe a quick break just to check in about how that landed. As long as I can figure out how to see you guys through this. Wait, now I can see you guys. Wait, figuring this out. Okay, pause share. Oh, and then I can open that. And then I can see you guys now, and maybe you can see me. I'm not sure. You guys can see me, right?
Mhm.
Cool. I haven't done a Zoom presentation in a minute, so I know I said a lot there. So I just wanted to check in. Would you guys like to take a minute to maybe talk with a partner about your results and what you thought of just that basic theory? Does that sound like a good idea? Or how are we feeling with that?
Can we ask you a few questions?
Yeah, I think that's okay. Sure. We can start there because we said a little bit. And after this, I will go into the 9 types, which will be a solid bit. But after, then we'll definitely get a break to think more about that. So if you just want to chill in this room now and have some water and let that brain relax, I'm here for questions for a sec. Just about what you heard. And then I can stretch my chest. from speaking.
Hello. I was curious. The last picture you showed on the slide with the growth and stress
Mhm,
uh, picture where nine pointed at three
mhm,
for growth, but
mhm,
3 pointed at nine for stress.
mhm.
You, would you postulate that maybe a person that's of a personality three would need a personality of a person that's nine to be able to learn from them and better themselves, right?
Like to know a person who's a 9 to be able to understand themselves, is that what you mean?
Or like, yeah, like they would need to integrate themselves into talking to a person with a number nine to be
Yeah.
able to grow, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, you definitely learn about your type from other types. Oh my goodness, it's so cool. But actually, I also would argue it's within yourself. So, because what you're integrating in a way is different from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'm a 4. And we'll go into 4s a bit, but they're pretty like, oh my God, I'm so unique, woe is me, kind of. That's like their mantra, okay? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they integrate into 1s, and 1s are very pragmatic and purposeful and really are moral in their understandings of the world and aren't as like dramatic as a 4 and kind of put the 4 in line. So when you think of your own psychological growth, say you're also maybe you're a 2 and you're a 2 that is stressed out, and a 2 is a very they give a lot to other people. So they integrate into 4, I believe. So that's also, they give so much to other people that when they integrate to 4, they gain this really cool sense of self and themness. Since 4s are all about, oh, woe is me, it's all, I'm unique, blah, blah, blah. So 2s get to gain this level of self, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it is almost like your little hero's journey, if you think about it, if you relate enough to your Enneagram. And that's what's really cool about it. And you have the backwards hero's journey, right? Where you digress and go into like, the negative aspects of the number. And then if you integrate and you're growing, like working on yourself, whatever you need, maybe that's doing nothing, right? Some people doing nothing is their growth. Then it'll take on the positive traits of that number. And so these
Mm-hmm.
arrows don't change. If you look up Enneagram integrations on other websites, you'll see that they go the same directions of where they digress and where they integrate. Okay, is
Mm-hmm.
that helpful?
Interesting. So you said like you were a number four, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you integrate and you progress to a number one,
Yeah.
and then one would turn into seven.
Mm-hmm.
So like, is there like some sort of like a completion task, or
Yeah.
is it just like, or yeah, how would you explain that?
So remember that symbol I showed you at the very beginning of class that was the hexad, not the very beginning of class, the very beginning of this presentation, that had the hexad and the triangle?
Mm-hmm.
That's the process. So some people can, I've heard that some people can really go through the whole thing. Like, I mean, for the 9 and the 3 and the 6 system, this
Mm-hmm.
is a really deep topic, so I'm just gonna branch on this lightly. But basically, the triangle system has its own relations as that shape that are different from the hexad system. So it might seem like 9, 6, and 3 have less steps. Their steps are just different. And they have like this different, since they go into the thinking triad, the feeling triad, and the instinct triad, right? So they have like their own place. Each number with the 3 setup has its own place because there's a number that is in the center of that triad, right? And then there's a
Mm-hmm.
number on the corner of the triad and on the other corner of the triad. Okay. So it's like close to
Mm-hmm.
the thinking center, close to the feeling center. So
Yeah.
like there's all these inner workings into it that you can read about, but I just want to make sure you guys get the basics today. Because we gotta keep going. But yeah, it can interrelate and you stay in your hexad and the 9 and the 6 and the 3 stay in their triangle. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm right. I trust myself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing, Sunny.
Yeah, is there any other quick questions? And then if we're feeling good, I can keep going.
Would
Let's
it be
keep going.
okay if
Go
we
ahead, Sam.
emailed you with
Sorry?
lengthier questions? Would it be okay if we emailed you with lengthier questions?
Yeah, totally,
Okay.
totally. Yeah. No, we probably should keep going because we got to go over all 9 types. So, and I'm just gonna keep going just to make sure we get them all. And you might know somebody related to these types, and it might be you. So just vibe with that. So I will continue here if we're good. I think we're good. So I'll resume my share, and we'll hop into the 9 types. So fun. I'm obsessed with the gram. Oh my god. Okay, let me put you in the corner so I can see you guys. I like to see your little faces. Okay. All right. So we're gonna go after each one of these guys. We love them all. So let's get started. So we have 9 personality types. And we're gonna start with the 1. Now this is the reformer, and I just threw in little pictures so that you can kind of like get a little idea of them. So the 1 is the rational and idealistic type. Principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionistic. I think that says my little camera square in the corner that's kind of blocking it, but you guys can read that. I don't need to read everything off to you. So if you look in the corner, you can see where they integrate and they digress. So they integrate into 4 and they digress into 7. And just to let you know, some of the photos in the presentations are digress and some of them are integrate, so I'll let you know. But basically, 1s are really focused on what's right and wrong and how to be good. They really strive to improve, and they pick up on, errors in their life and other people's lives. So that's kind of how they go about the world. So I focused on, if you look, and then there's basic desires. So it's really important to them to be right. They strive for ideals. They, will correct injustices by that rightness, and they'll disdain mistakes, and they really just want to help and be good with the world. Their biggest fears, though, is the inverse of that, right? So being bad, defective, or corrupt. This is someone who's probably been referenced to as a goody two shoots that makes them want to go into 7 that you'll hear about later. But yeah, goody two shoes type apparently. And at their best, they are ethical, purposeful, big social change makers, and are really detailed with their integrity. And at their worst, they're the invert of that, right? So they can be intolerant, unforgiving, self-critical with that anger we talked about, because this is in the instinct center, right? So they'll have this repressed anger at themselves experience that, they can be really out of touch with their anger, trying to be so good, right? And common mantras are, I'm okay if what I do is right. So there's some words there, and you don't have to know all these words, just take in what you can about the whole person. All right, cool. So that's the reformer. I'm gonna hop to the helper, which, not not all 2s are moms, but a lot of moms are 2s. It's a big joke because they're so loving. So 2s are the first in the feeling center. And in this diagram, this shows their digression. So they digress into 8, move into 4. They're the caring, people-pleasing, interpersonal, demonstrative, and generous type. So it's really important for them to care and nurture and give to others while being needed. So, they're really focused on the wants and needs of other people and helping and being appreciated. God makes their world. They really love to be appreciated for what they do. And their basic fears are being unworthy of love and with who they really are, and what they can bring to others. So if they can't help someone, it's really hard for them. And at their best, they have this kind, nurturing energy that is caring, and this selflessness of support and really being there for you. Like they will pick up the phone. At their worst, though, they can actually be the invert of that, right? So they'll become these people pleasers who can be out of touch with their own emotional experience and their own emotional needs, and become clingy and possessive, manipulative. So it's, you know, all these types have their own codependency, and at their worst, they can really have that codependent experience, as all of us start with codependency in some way. Um, and their mantra is everyone needs my help, and I'm okay if I'm loved and appreciated by others. I know a lot about twos because my mom's a two, and I love her. All right, so let's hop into three. So three is the achiever. All right, so this is still in the feeling center and the triangle we were talking about with the 9 and the 6. All right, so going into that, this is the success-oriented pragmatic types. They are adaptable, excelling, driven, and image conscious. So this is an integration photo. So they integrate to 9, digress into 6. Pardon me. 3s really focus on what brings success and approval for themselves with accomplishing goals and tasks having recognition. So their basic desires are really achievement and being accomplished and distinguishing themselves from their people and being seen with that experience. And some of their basic fears are being seen as the invert, right? So being seen as unsuccessful, being a nobody, losing credibility and being worthless apart from their achievements. So if they're not doing something, man, they do not feel good. And they really want to help other people, but also innovate their own lives. They can be very innovative. So at their best, they are charismatic, hardworking, and efficient, and energetic for sure, and inspiring with how much they can do. At their worst, though, they can become the invert of that. And if they're more on the energetic side, maybe they can be exploitative and very competitive and narcissistic. And, really focus on doing things at the expense of their own emotional needs. And so, if they're less on the energetic side, they might really struggle with shame if they can't, be seen as achieving to their loved ones. And so that's why shame is in that core area, right? Yeah, and they're okay if they can gain others' approval through what they do. Right. I love 3s. I love them all. Sorry. So this is me. This is type 4, the individualist. We love them. So 4s they're sensitive and the withdrawn type. So they're expressive, dramatic, and self-absorbed. And I can't see that last word there because of the little square, but that's okay. So they're really focused on, in their life, longing for what's missing. They live in this existential longing where they're, wanting, maybe what others have or some fantasy experience, right? And they really thrive off their own uniqueness and uniqueness of life and specialness and fulfilling experiences, okay? And so their basic desires in life are really to express their specialness and uniqueness, and whether that's within themselves or others, outwardly, and really finding their own authenticity to create, to inspire, to be noticed, and use their talents and really appreciate beauty. So, tortured artist, right? And their basic fears is having no personal meaning, significance, or identity. And for me as a 4, that would personally, with my choice in my life, would look like, having an an office job where I'm just like slouched over and like am not doing anything meaningful, right? That's just me. Now, at their best, right? They're creative, emotionally intelligent, expressive, self-aware, and authentic and artistic. At their worst, right? They can be quite dramatic, even snobby, over-identified with their emotions and moody, really sensitive, very sensitive, jealous, and really get fixated on expectations and fantasy projection. So they have this deep emotional well of woe is me to the point where they can't get real, right? And so that's why they integrate to 1, right? Because they got that purposeful experience. And they digress to 2 because they're not in their authenticity. They're taking care of other people so much, right? So no one can truly understand me is their mantra. But also they're good if they're just being themselves. That's where they feel good. All right, so that was a bunch of the feeling center, besides one that was in the instinctive center. So now we're going to hop to the thinking center, which is our first one, the investigator. This one I know pretty well, but it's probably, one that has taken me a lot to learn about. It is my wing, but I've been learning about this one. My bad. So the investigator is the intense cerebral type. They're perceptive, innovative, and secretive. And very knowledgeable. They're really focused on their life with observing to better understand, acquiring information and knowledge, and becoming self-sufficient. And, they'll really consider the expectations of others and have this sense of scarcity in their life with their energy and time. So, they're learning about a lot of things to secure themselves because they don't necessarily feel like they can handle a lot of worldly things. They're very in the thinking center with that. All right. So basic desires, right, is to be capable, competent, to know why things work and why, and to understand people around them and gain a sense of reality and security. So they really dive into their books to learn how to interact in the world. And their fears are the opposite of that, okay? Helplessness, uselessness, incapable, and just overwhelmed with the intensity of the unknown and the overwhelmingness of life. So at their best, they're intelligent, insightful, curious, critical thinking, and perceptive. And so they're amazing. I have a 5 I always go to for Google searching personally because they're just so knowledgeable, genuinely. And so they, at their worst, can be, the opposite of that. So they can be emotionally distant and just really in their mind, overthinking and analyzing and detached, and find it really hard to just, emotionally connect with other people because they're so concerned with knowing. So they're okay if they mastered something, and protecting their energy and resources is very important to them. So now we're back at the triangle with the 6, who is the loyalist. So we'll go right into that. Now, 6s are very helpful. They are the committed, security-oriented type. So they're not a 5, but they still have that security orientation. But remember, thinking center is fear. So they're all going to be trying to seek security in some way, right? So the 6 is different in that they're engaging responsibility, and that's what they go for. And they can be anxious and very suspicious or skeptical. So they're like, I feel like the investigator is a better word for the loyalist sometimes, but the loyalist has this different tone to them. They are really focused on hazards around them in their experience, potential worst case scenarios, very vigilant, and also questioning authority, very big for them. Their basic desires are to seek safety by figuring out possible ways things could go wrong, right? So really trying to make sure they can figure out a map and lead themselves to safety. So, they want to overcome their fears and feel safe while using their vigilancy. Basic fears are that lack of security that they're so scared of, and having no support. And that is very hard for a 6 if they don't have that support. It can really bring them to a hard place. They really thrive with community. And not being able to survive in their own environment is very difficult. Now, at the triangle, they're in the center of the thinking center. So, the anxiety is really big for them. At their best, committed, loyal team player, critical thinker that you can trust, and is very responsible, right? So, very supportive team player. At their worst, they can be paranoid, self-doubting, and not trust themselves. So that fear becomes so big that it just feels like they can't, trust the world around them. And it's just so overwhelming, and they'll become defensive, stubborn, and not have confidence. But, their mantra is kind of like, things might go wrong. I'm okay if I can anticipate risks and do what's expected of me. And they're so helpful for, learning and engaging and figuring out the problem. You really want them on your work team. They're so great. Then we got the 7, which it's funny, this picture actually looks like my dad, who is a 7. So it's like Santa on steroids or something. I really feeling it. So this is the enthusiast, and this is still in the thinking center. A little different, but they're right by the instinctive center. So see, he's really in his body there because he's right on the corner there. So the enthusiast is the busy, fun-loving type. They are spontaneous, versatile, and why can't I read that right now? You guys can read the rest of those words. So 7s, they're really the one who, you're at a party and they are there all the way to the very end. Like they're the last one up, okay? Because they're really focused on the possibilities in the future, interesting ideas, pleasurable experiences, and really focusing on the limits and constraints in their life. So it's not always the idea that they're just moving towards the next fun thing. It's that they're concerned with their own limits and restraints that can hold them back from those experiences. So basic desires are to feel joy and possibility and really hold space for freedom and happiness. And FOMO, they really will avoid missing out. Like they want to be there to stay excited and occupied. Fears, invert of that, is the FOMO, right? They do not want to miss out on the excitement or feel the pain and discomfort of something not enjoyable and enthusiastic. So feeling like their freedom is limited is really scary for them, going back to their focus on constraints on their fun and experience. So at their best, they're free-spirited, adaptable, collaborative, spontaneous, and really that energetic catalyst. So if you got an idea, sounds fun, they're going to make it happen with you. They want to go ride horses after midnight. That's a true story for me. At their worst, they can be the invert of that. So scattered, impatient, just on the go so much where they just wreck themselves, okay? And, becoming manic. And so they become, they'll digress into 5, and, they're doing really well if they can integrate to 1 and gain some boundaries on how much fun they're having, because, you can't have fun all the time, right? So it's about fun, but it's also about their needs, not feeling constrained. Remember that. So it's okay. They're okay if they get what they need. All right. And the party starts when they walk in. So let's hop into the next one, where we're going to go into, we have 2 more left. And we're going to hop into the instinctive center. So remember, these are our body. These are our physical, boundary-loving folks. So we have 8, the challenger. My best friend's an 8. Just wanted to throw that out there. The challenger is the powerful and dominating type. They're self-confident, decisive, and they are willful and very confrontational, okay? So they are really focused on power dynamics, who's in control and who can need protection. So they want to protect other people as well as protect themselves, okay? I'm gonna have some water really fast. Whee! All right, so their basic desires are to be self-reliant, okay? They don't want to depend on other people. They want to have their boundaries, taking charge by making rules, okay? And they do not want to depend on other people or be vulnerable a lot of the time. That's a very sensitive place for them. It's not that these people don't feel vulnerability at all, and that's a very misunderstanding of their type. That they do, and they are emotional, but it's just very sacred, and their basic fears with that would be being controlled by other people, right? Vulnerability, people come and control that or harm you, very damaging. So rejection, sensitivity, lack of control, or being harmed by others is a lot. So when they're doing well, they're protective and strong and authentic and resourceful, confident. They will stick up for you, in a good way. And that's why they integrate to 2. So this is a picture of disintegration. So they become like 2, as in like they're using their strength to help people. That's the really cool thing with their integration to 2. So, right, they'll be strong and helpful with that. But at their worst, that anger that's repressed in there can come out, or not repressed, maybe even overly done with innate. That anger can come out, and they'll be demanding, and they'll really see vulnerability as a weakness, and that's where that's their journey, is sitting with that vulnerability, and that's where they're at. So they're okay if they're strong and in control. Um, Only the strong survive. So good. And then we're to our last type, which we're all very familiar with, because that's Ken sitting on that rock right there, because Ken's a 9. So the peacemaker, so May and Anna are both 9s. I just outed them, sorry. So 9s are the easygoing, self-effacing type. They are receptive, reassuring, and agreeable. And I think that says complacent there. So we got multiple words there to kind of explain that. So this image shows their disintegration, right? So they will digress into 6, right? We've already been through this triangle. So they're really focused on the conflict and discomfort, okay, with other people and themselves. And they want to avoid that. They're aware when the problems are going on, and they will watch and observe. And they're great mediators with that, but sometimes they can really, distance themselves from the present. So their basic desires are to maintain inner stability and peace of mind, to avoid conflict by neglecting their own needs and wants. So, like they like to really be able to secure themselves by how they interact in their environment. It can show up in different ways for different types of 9s. So some of their basic fears for the invert of that would be, right, if they can't keep the peace, it'd be disconnecting from the whole situation. So having a sense of separation or loss or conflict, it's very intense for them. They really feel that energy, and it's very separating for their heart, right? If they see someone hurting and they can't help them, or be there present for that experience and mediate the energy. So at their best, they're accepting, excelling listeners, and they're receptive. So they'll be receptive of the conflict, be able to take that in, and trusting, stable, and supportive. Now, the invert of that would be if they can't, handle the conflict. So they become passive aggressive about it and shut down and become complacent or sloth-like and overly accommodating, right? So they're so supportive in their mediation style that they will lose their own needs and lose their own story a bit. But once they tune into like who they are and their mediation system, they can integrate into 3 really well and become just this amazing observer who can support people's experiences and be amazing at receiving energy in the world. So they're okay if other people are okay. And why can't we all just get along? It's very important. So that's the 9 types. And I would love to get into wings, which is another part of this that I think is really important for you guys to learn about. But I'm thinking now is a good time to take another little break. So let me just check in with you guys and find my mouse. I'm going to pause, share. I'm going to find, I feel like, ooh, oh no, I've lost. Oh God. Okay, wait, I found it. Okay, sorry, I got lost. Oh, I'm here. Hi. It's like when I present, like, okay, it doesn't show me my mouse when I present, and it freaks me out because I'm like, oh my gosh. Cool. So Ken, it's just 6 o'clock, which is great.
Yeah, you're good find as far as time. Absolutely.
I'm making good time. It's my 3 wing. Okay. So now how about we get into groups of 2, just so we can like talk about what we've learned a bit and maybe think of where our type sits right now. And then I'm going to tell you about one last dynamic about how it works, because there's some other ways that it might relate. And so just whatever types you're thinking you relate to, you can talk about them. How's that sound? Does that sound good? Can I get some thumbs? Can I get some thumbs? Ooh, I got thumbs. Cool. Just wanted to go off a little more about how these types can vary, and just explain more about how you can relate to multiple types at once, right? So we have the Enneagram symbol, and it's very dynamic, right? And there's a lot more to it that I'm not going to include in this lecture, but you can definitely research it as well. So types are very broad categories, okay? And people of the same type may share core traits, but everyone's unique, okay? So you're not going to relate to everything that your type fully relates to. They represent themselves in very different ways. Like I said, there can be 54 different types of Enneagram representations if you include all the wings and the instinctual variants, which is amazing. So it's very diverse. Okay, so just for some type variations, I'm going to go into wings, and I'm going to just, re-explain a bit of that integration, disintegration relating to their levels of psychological health. Okay, so I'll start with wings, and, I thought maybe if we had time, we can go over instinctual variants, but this is a lot today, so I'll just leave you with that to research on your own. So you get somewhere to jump off on if you're feeling Enneagram crazy. So let's hop into wings. So you know how I was talking about how there's 9 types? Basically, if you look at the highlighted numbers on the right image, you see that there's 2 numbers highlighted, and that's the full instinct center, right? Just for this image. Basically, you have your core type, but most people have traits from both types on either side of them or one type. So this would be described as a 9 wing 1. That's what the W represents. So you can also be a 9 wing 8. So Ken's a 9 wing 1, but he's pretty strong in his 8 at this time of his life. He's been around. So that's one example of what a wing sounds like. And that means that you have traits from the Enneagram number next to you. So if we look on the left image, let's take a look at number 1, for example. So if it's a 1 wing 2, that's leaning to the right, that means that they are on the verge of the feeling and instinct center, right? So it's a whole different experience than a 9 who's right in the middle of the instinct center, or a 6 who's in the middle of the thinking center. So I'm a 4 wing 3, and what that looks like for me is I have that authentic, creative outlet in my life, but as a 3, that achiever we were talking about, I really put those things into action. And that's why I like to do things like this. And I also have a 5 wing technically. And if you look at the symbol, the 5 and the 4 are actually the most distant on the whole Enneagram, because the thinking and the feeling center is, they're very different, right? So, but I do have some aspects of my 5 wing. I've actually brought it in more this year. And I kind of call it a shadow wing. It's the wing that gets ignored. It's my thinking side as a feeler. So, some people who are 5 wing 4 specifically, or 4 wing 5s, can feel very in tandem with their thinking and feeling experience. Same thing with 8 wing 7s, and 7 wing 8s, or 1 wing 2s, or 2 wing 1s. So that's what a wing is. So if you looked at your results and you noticed, oh, I had a high 9 score and a high 8 score, if you can look up like what those are, right? And you can see which is your core type and which is your wing. So here's a great meme for what wings are. I love this meme because, right, we know 7s are like, for example, let's just sum it up, party animal. That's just a joke, but the enthusiast with an 8 wing, they're going to be like, it's very important to me about constricting my boundaries, right? But a 7 wing 6 will be kind of like, I'm here for a good time, but are we chill? Like, are you on my side? We cool, like that's their experience. So that's a great meme. Love it. There's a lot of good Enneagram memes out there. All right. So then after this, I'm just going to hop into this real quick. This is the levels of development. So you know your wing, you know your type. How does that show up differently in your life already? So, this makes it even more explaining. So basically, the Enneagram symbol, if it was brought up 3-dimensionally, it can come like a cylinder, and these levels explain how it shows. So if someone's doing really not well in their life, okay, they don't have community, they don't have food, they're, financially insecure, and they're really struggling, and they're, psychologically, healthily dysfunctional, they can be at a level 9, for example. So if you look at type 5 for levels of development, that person psychologically could actually have schizoid traits. Or if they're an 8 level, they could be delusional or paranoid. But if it's a 5 doing very well in their life, they have all their needs met, their Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like chilling, okay? They're really meeting their needs. They can be at level 1 and be like a very uplifted person and a pioneering visionary, right? Most of us, though, generally are on the 5 to 3 or 3 to 5 category. I'm usually at a 4. Lately, I've been at a 5 because of COVID. And some people, their levels of functioning can really change. I know some people, their levels of functioning can drop from like 3 to 9 in a day if they're really wounded by an experience. So that's just like, if you look up these levels, you can find descriptions of them, like, how am I doing? What's my next step? So that's just levels of development. And then just lastly, I'm just going to say this really quick. Identifying your type. How do I do that? What do I do? I think we learned a lot today. People seem like they're grabbing it really well, but I'm just going to give you a few tips on how to identify your type. So basically, you can take online tests, but that is just the starting point. If your test gives you a number that you don't relate to, that can be kind of scary for some people because they're like, oh my gosh, like, what am I? And then they never look up anything about it and they drop it. If that happens and you have like confusing results, or those also make sense to you, read about the types and see what resonates with you. You don't need to take a test for the answer. Like for 9s, for example, sometimes when they take the test, they really struggle to identify with the answers on the test. So they'll actually come up as a bunch of different numbers. I know a lot about 9s. Now, you can also find videos on YouTube a lot or blogs by people that are your type and just listen to how you relate to them. And it can help you figure out more things about yourself that you didn't know how to put a story to, which is really cool. And so if you're torn between 2 or more types, check the wings. Do you identify with a number that has wings that you also relate to? Is one wing more you relate to than the other, right? You can also check the integration and disintegration like we talked about, right? If you're a 4, did you have a high 1 score? That probably means you're doing pretty good right now. And, you know, that's a great way to look it up. And you can also just go on the Enneagram Institute website. They're probably the best Enneagram website out there. They'll try to trick you into buying an Enneagram test. I have a free one that's like practically the same, so don't do that. And you can go on their website though and read a lot of articles about misidentifying types. So yeah, that's just like ways to learn about it. Or you can shoot me an email and talk with me later sometime outside of class, and I can just like read you like a poem. And so now we're here for questions and discussion if we have the time, making sure we meet all the needs of class, as long as I can figure out how to stop screen sharing. Oh, I did it so fast this time. Oh my God, fantastic. Thank you, gang. Now we can all share the Enneagram jokes. I'm gonna stop recording.